to talk to a really good apologetic? I mean, I don't mean kind of good, like Father Tattoo. I mean, really, really good. He's next. It's Dr. Alex McFarland, live on The View from a Pew.
Let's get it started. Let's get it started.
Welcome to The View from a Pew, a conversation among Christians who are out to grow our faith by asking the simple questions, the tough questions, the stuff you really wish your pastor would talk about. Come on now, let's reason together. It's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so join the conversation. Call 855-244-0077. That's 855-244-0077. Now here's your host, President of the Not a Good Enough Christian Club, J. Michael McCoy.
All right, welcome. It is the 23rd day of November in the Lord's year 2012, the day after Thanksgiving. I hope that you got a lot of turkey and a lot of ham and a lot of everything you wanted. I hope you drove safely. I hope everybody in your family's okay. And I hope Nebraska just kicked the heck out of Iowa. But that game's not quite over yet, so we'll have to do that later.
Not much hope for Iowa, is there?
No, not this year, I'm afraid. You know, one of the things that I fell in love with when I dedicated my life to Christ was apologetics. It was a word I didn't understand. I thought it had to do with making apologies. Dr. Michael Berry could have helped me with that, I guess. But it was about how to cope with and deal with and debate with and discuss with atheists, mainly, on Christian principles and ways of the Bible and being in a relationship with Christ. And I did it very poorly. I did it arrogantly. I did it with an attitude. I didn't do it with love. I thought I was really good at it, but what I really did was just shouted the person down to the point where they walked away from me. And I became a horrible witness for Jesus. Well, when I figured out how to do it, guys like Dr. Alex McFarland helped me realize how to do it in love and how to do it the right way. He is the host of a talk show, host of Explore the World radio program, an author, speaker, and he is an expert in Christian apologetics. Welcome to the show, Dr. Alex McFarland. Thank you for being here on this day after Thanksgiving.
Oh, my goodness. You guys are so kind. I've got to step away. My head is getting so big.
Oh, well,
thank you very much.
You've been blessed. Hey, these are just the gifts that God gave you, and we're doing nothing more than shining the light on what God has already shined his light on you. Now,
well, we give God the glory. Hey, let me tell you something about being thankful. We are so blessed. And in the intro, you mentioned the turkey and all the food. A couple of years ago, I was part of a missions conference, and some people came from Ethiopia. And we were on an early Sunday morning to pick up these two visitors from the airport. And they had been on an all-night flight. And this was these men from Ethiopia, their first visit ever to America. So it's like 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning, and I said, let's get you guys something to eat. Let me pop in a grocery store here. We'll get you guys a donut or a bagel or something. So these guys, they'd been on American soil, 45 minutes. We go in this grocery store, and they were just in awe. I mean, they literally were speechless looking at, thousands of boxes of cereal and hundreds of loaves of bread. And this man asked me, he said, is there a food repository like this in every city?
Oh, my.
I said, hey, there's one on every corner. And I have this image in my mind. I think about it at Thanksgiving of these guys when they were in a typical American grocery store, literally speechless at the food. And we're blessed, aren't we?
Yeah, we really take it for granted. My church does a lot of mission work, and I talk to the folks that come back from these missions in Uganda and in Africa and even down in Navajo Village in Arizona, and they all come back with this humility and this humbleness to how much we have in this country.
A food repository in every city.
It's amazing. All right, you've written a couple books, 10 Answers for Skeptics, and the latest is 10 Answers for Atheists. First of all, talk to me like I'm a 6-year-old and define what an atheist is.
Oh, that's a great question. A different atheist will give you different answers. Some will say, like my friend David Silverman, we were in Louisiana to debate last week. He would say it's the absence of belief in any deity. And some atheists are kind of passive, and they'll say, you know what, I just don't have any belief. But then others are militant, and they're not only non-believers in God, they're really anti-God. And so, but it's basically the lack of a belief in any deity.
All right, what's the difference between an atheist and an agnostic?
Great question. Agnostic, the word itself really means absence of knowledge. And some agnostics will say that they personally don't know if there's a God or not. And then others will say, well, no one could know. So there's a little bit of clarification there. Some that are just saying, hey, I don't know. There may be a God, but I personally don't know. But a more hard-shell agnostic would be like, not only do I not know, nobody could know. Knowledge of God is impossible.
Our guest is Dr. Alex McFarland. He has his own radio program called Explore the World Radio Program. I'm trying to look for alexmcfarland.com. There you go.
There we go.
Yeah, Alex.
And we do a big conference every year. We've done for about 18 years called Truth for a New Generation. Just got through with that conference. We bring together a lot of people like Josh McDowell and Lee Strobel, and that website is truthforanewgeneration.com.
All right, so those are the websites we want to steer people to. By the way, you are the director for Christian Worldview and Apologetics at the Christian Worldview Center in North Greenville University in Greenville, South Carolina.
Correctamundo.
Did you guys get hit by Sandy at all very badly, or were you okay?
Oh, we were okay. Thanks for asking. You know, it got a little rainy, it got a little windy, but it was minor compared to what those poor folks up in New Jersey and the Northeast suffered. So we fared pretty well.
All right, let me. By the way, we've got several co-hosts in today: Tom Coates, Army Brad, Bob Montserrat, and Father Tattoo. So there may be some other voices jump in here with questions, and they'll identify.
Yeah, I got a question.
Cool.
You're just going to interrupt right now and
No,
ask?
I'll let you finish what you're doing.
No. You ruined the mood now. Go ahead and ask any question you need.
Well, I heard you mention Josh McDowell and Lee Strobel, and those are both evidential guys. Is that conference that you do, is that strictly evidential, or do you work in apologetics or precept stuff, or is it, I mean...
You know, we've kind of made it very eclectic over the years. I mean, we've had everybody from, people like R.C. Sproul and Ravi Zacharias and Oz Guinness and Peter Kraft to Josh McDowell, Norm Geisler, Chuck Colson, James Dobson. I mean, we've had reform, non-reform. What I've tried to do in the Truth for a New Generation conferences, my vision 20 years ago was to reach young people, to reach teenagers, and but we found that so many of their parents would come, and they want this too. But we've really tried to keep way out front, like what C.S. Lewis would call mere Christianity or core Christianity, kind of all the things everybody would agree on, like the authority of Scripture, the deity of Christ, and I guess I'm kind of a mind that as long as you get into this great big family called the body of Christ, that I'm happy about that. It doesn't matter to me if you end up, reformed or non-reformed or precept or evidential or classical, although I would consider myself a classical apologist. But the conferences don't hone in on any one methodology.
Dr. Alex McFarland is our guest. He's host of the Explore the World radio program, the author of the books 10 Answers for Skeptics and 10 Answers for Atheists, and you can find him at alexmcfarland.com. Tom Coates has a question.
Yeah, Dr. McFarland, we've come off of a very heated and contentious political season. Now we head into the Christmas season, and we see more evidence of not just the passive agnostics, but the very militant atheist in our society, in our culture. What kind of counsel do you give to Christians, perhaps such as myself, that want to get right in their face, as Max said, and take them on and be righteously indignant for the type of society that they seek to perpetrate on us and our kids?
I think we need both and. I mean, I think personally, we need to be kind and try to build bridges and talk to people. But I really do think that in the public arena, Christians have got to unify. And let me say this, it is the atheists. It is the atheists who are abridging the First Amendment rights of people. The atheists, and they know this, and I've got to say, for the books I've written, I've interviewed 34 professed atheists, including twice I interviewed Christopher Hitchens before he died, some of the well-known atheists. There are those within the atheist movement that they are actively trying to cleanse this culture of any reference to God. I debated an attorney from California back in the spring who is part of one of the People for a Godless America movements. And I really think that we have to firmly, decisively, unyieldingly defend the fact that this country was founded as a nation that is really based on theism. In fact, I can prove this. It was recognized by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. in his 1963 Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Why We Can't Wait, talks about the fact that not only is the civil rights movement predicated on a biblical worldview, but America itself was birthed in the belief that there is a God, the Judeo-Christian God, the Ten Commandments. There is, you can call it natural law or self-evident truth, but there are moral rights and wrongs. And Dr. King, when I've debated different atheists, I'll say this. I'll say, look, I can quote the Founding Fathers. I can quote great thinkers throughout history. Let me quote Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who affirmed that this was birthed as a Christian nation. Was Dr. King right or was he wrong? Now, most atheists that have at least presence of mind enough to know they'd better not on a college campus refute Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., they dance around. But, brothers, you are right. Santa Monica, ending a 60-year tradition of displaying public nativity scenes simply because one atheist cried about it. At Ground Zero, 9/11, there's an anomaly of the wreckage, a piece of steel that many people think looks like a cross. Atheist, American atheists are having an aneurysm about that. And, the man that wrote the First Amendment, Fisher Ames, said in 1801, the First Amendment was written around 1779 and ratified about 2 years later. But in 1801, Fisher Ames, who had written the First Amendment, said that he believed that the primary book in public schools should be the Bible because that was the best book to teach young people virtue and morality. And I've asked different atheists, I'm like, how is it that the man who wrote the First Amendment, who wanted the Bible taught in public school, how is it that you atheists in the 21st century know more about the First Amendment than the man who wrote it?
That's great.
And
Dr. Alex McFarland is our guest today. He is the Director for Christian Worldview and Apologetics at the Christian Worldview Center in North Greenville University in Greenville, South Carolina. He hosts his own radio show called Explore the World radio program, and he has authored several books, including Answers for Skeptics and Answers for Atheists. We're going to take our first break now, and when we come back, we're going to continue to talk to Dr. Alex McFarland, and I'm gonna talk to me.
We got a minute. Well, not anymore.
Yeah, I know. And I'm gonna play the devil's advocate here. If Dr. McFarland will allow me to, I'm going to ask some of the questions that I get asked all the time by atheists. I seem to be kind of like cheese, and atheists are mice, and they like to come nibble on me. And I'm okay with that. If that's how God wants to use me, I got no problem with that. And so I'm gonna go to the Alex McFarland School of Apologetics here for the next 30 minutes or so, and you get to listen. It is Friday. It is the day after Thanksgiving. Thanks for being with us today on this gorgeous day, live here on 99.3. This is KTIA Iowa, and I'm J. Michael McCoy. If I haven't told you lately, thanks for listening. I love this job, and I couldn't do it without you. Here on KTIA, powered by WebcastOneLive.com.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
The dawn of a new era begins.
Fight the good fight on a Rebels Cause Radio, Thursday evenings at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time on a rebelscause.com. A Rebels Cause Radio is edutainment.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Come on now, let's reason together. The phone lines are open, and it's your voice we want to hear. So call 855-244-0077. Now here's J. Michael McCoy.
Okay, 21 minutes after the hour on this, the 23rd day of November in the Lord's year 2012. Unless you're Jewish, then it's 5773. I'm J. Michael McCoy. Day after Thanksgiving. I hope you're healthy, wealthy, thankful, and wise. I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful upcoming weekend with your family. Don't forget, if you're looking for a church home or just looking to visit a church, you're always invited to go with me. And I don't mean go to my church. I mean I'll meet you somewhere. I'll be glad my wife and I will come and pick you up if you're unable to drive around, and I'll take you to one of our services. We have 5, 6:30, 7:15, 8:15, 9:15, 11, and then again at 5 on Sunday night. So always lots of chairs, lots of good food, hot Lutheran coffee. You know, we wouldn't be Lutherans without good coffee. And that, of course, is at the Lutheran Church of Hope, that little teeny church right there at the corner of Ashworth and Jordan Creek Parkway. All right, my guest on this day after Thanksgiving is Dr. Alex McFarland. He's the director of Christian Worldview and Apologetics at the Christian Worldview Center in North Greenville University in Greenville, South Carolina, and is also the host of Explore the World radio program. He's written several books, including 10 Answers for Skeptics and 10 Answers for Atheists. This guy is a dynamite apologetic. His picture is on the screen if you're on webcastonelive.com, and he's a handsome fellow, too. I want to go to the Dr. Alex McFarland School for Apologetics for just a minute. If you'll allow me to play devil's advocate, would that be okay?
I don't want you to be an advocate of the devil.
I've had people tell me that. Yeah, I don't want to either. One of my number one questions. I have a lot of friends. I don't know why, but I have a lot of friends who are atheists, and they like to pick on me. I remember we had one guy on. We had the National Convention for Atheists here in Des Moines 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And I had this guy in, and he said, oh, yeah, we've got like 600 and some atheists coming from all over the world to this national convention. I said, I've got more than that in my Iowa caucus in the middle of a winter storm in January. How can you be proud of that? Well, he was awful proud of it. It's kind of interesting, Dr. McFarland. He told me that the worst thing I could do for him was pray for him. Yeah. So at the end of the show, I prayed for him.
Wow.
He didn't like it.
It's interesting. Last week in Louisiana, when I was debating David Silverman, who is a friend of mine. Silverman is president of American Atheists. He is in many ways a great guy and a great friend. And I do care about the friendship that we have, but, just very, very stubborn in his atheism. But he was kind of boasting that he knows 400 ex-ministers that once were in some type of ministry but now claim to be an atheist. And I said, well, I've met people that have bailed out on their faith. But I said, David, I meet an ex-Christian, now atheist, maybe once or twice a year. I meet an ex-atheist, now born-again Christian, a dozen times a week. I mean, I spoke Sunday in a church in South Carolina, and two men came up to me, one of whom was a professor at a local college in South Carolina. Two men came up in one service and said, I used to be an atheist, and I began to look at the evidence. Now I'm a born-again Christian. So, the atheists, when they have their little gatherings, they like to bring out their counter-examples for, all the people who become believers in Christ. They can bring out somebody who's an ex-person who's repudiated God. But, that in no way negates the reality of Jesus. Jesus is still the risen Lord and Savior, regardless of how many people turn into Judas and betray him. But so you had one of the conference there in Iowa, huh?
Yeah, we had one in Iowa, and they had billboards all over, and
sure.
Then the next year they canceled the convention because they didn't have enough people signed up to come.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the way it was. Okay, Bob Montserrat, who's one of my co-hosts, who is a forensic scientist by trade, has a question for you.
Sure.
Yeah, my question is, you mentioned as you were speaking that he knew a bunch of pastors that bailed out of their religion. Can you tell us what the main reason that they gave for bailing out of their faith?
Well, let me say, in the persons with whom I've spoken over the years, it's always an intellectual skepticism preceded by emotional pain of some sort. The book 10 Answers for Atheists, and I interviewed 34 professed atheists. But interestingly, 28 were ex-Protestants, 4 were ex-Roman Catholics, 2 claimed to have never ever believed in any deity. But of the 28 ex-Protestants, I don't want to trivialize, because these are real people with real, minds and souls, and I'm not trying to minimize this, but always the intellectual skepticism was precipitated by some emotional pain. Now, they'll prop up their unbelief with sophisticated-sounding argumentation, and they'll point to, Darwin or some type of scientific or philosophical, reason. Generally, the problem of evil, the problem of pain, or maybe the deity of the Old Testament seemed to be, a mean old, bad old, boogeyman. But if you get to the point where you can really peel back the onion and have a heart-to-heart conversation, invariably, the atheist will point to some sort of trauma that my dad was a deacon and he abused us, or I was a faithful Christian and the priest molested my neighbor, or something like that. Now, sometimes they will talk about some sort of trauma But now listen carefully. They'll say, like, I was a fundamental Christian. I went to Bible college, and I got to the university, and I discovered that Moses didn't write the Pentateuch, and that the Bible has been hodgepodge together. And then they'll say, oh, P.S., I came from a very legalistic background, and it was just a bunch of do's and don'ts. And what my friend Josh McDowell says it so well, that rules without relationship breeds rebellion. And I really think that two things have created more atheists than all the philosophers combined. Not that philosophers create atheists. I think good philosophy points people to God. But here's the thing. Christians behaving badly and legalism rather than true relationship with Jesus Christ. And therefore, I will say, at least in my experience, that the intellectual skepticism is virtually always preceded by some emotional trauma that cause people to be angry against God and to want to fight Him. And by the way, let me say this. Isn't it interesting with atheists? The people who talk more about God than anybody I know are atheists.
Yeah.
I mean, just the fact that I'm asked to debate the atheist, I said, isn't it amazing? I've never been asked to debate, are there unicorns with purple fur ridden by green leprechauns? I think the fact that the God issue is so pervasive reveals that we're taught there's something going on here. The atheists harp about God more than any preacher I know. I think that's very telling.
Yeah, Dr. McFarland, I always ask an atheist, I said, why do you want to get rid of a God that you don't believe in? I don't understand why you're offended by, as you said in San Diego, is that where you said San Diego, they're getting rid of the creche?
Nativity scene.
Nativity scene. All across this country, atheists are trying to get rid of signs from God, but they don't believe in God. And you make a good point. Don't you want to get rid of unicorns? Don't you want to get rid of leprechauns? What do you think is the psychology? Do a little Freud on me. What's the psychology behind that?
Well, I believe that our view of our earthly Father hugely informs our view of the Heavenly Father. And Francis Schaeffer talked about that as well. Edith and Francis Schaeffer talked a lot about that. And I will say this, that I know there's more, and I don't want to oversimplify, but many of the atheists with whom I've spoken, and even people that I've counseled as a pastor, that maybe they've come from what I call a toxic faith experience, and they're trying to maybe work their way back to belief in God. I've asked a lot of people, what's your relationship like with your Father? And invariably, it will be, I haven't spoken to him in years, or, I have no relationship with my Father, or it's a poor relationship. Let me say this. I talked with one atheist who had been raised by his grandfather, and his grandfather was in a state of depression, was on medication, didn't take his meds, ended up committing suicide. And so we had several issues at play here. And this young man who claimed to be an atheist and was very angry against God and just was an angry atheist. First of all, I said, well, tell me about your dad. And, well, I never knew my dad. I was born out of wedlock, and I was raised by my grandfather. So already there's this sense of having been orphaned and this pain of disconnectedness. And then the grandfather, when this young man was about 15, committed suicide. And my heart is breaking here. My wife and I were counseling this young man. Okay, now think about this. The only male role model in his life, it wasn't his biological father. It was a grandfather. But then the grandfather committed suicide. And the young man, I could see tears in his eyes, and he said, and I know that suicides go to hell. I said, whoa, wait a minute.
Oh, wow.
And in no way do I want to minimize the seriousness of suicide. But he explained his grandfather had been a Christian, been an exemplary, godly man. And I said, listen, this is an area that, we don't have ex cathedra a word on, but let me say many of the best and brightest minds in Christianity, including people like C.S. Lewis and Billy Graham have talked about the fact that it is possible for a born-again person to be in such a state of depression that they took their own life, but that doesn't mean that they go to hell. Now, we don't want to presume, and in no way would I ever, countenance suicide, but I said, look, could it be, young man, that the idea of your grandfather being in hell is so intolerable that you've, in your mind, created a world in which your grandfather is not in hell, but that came at the expense of God's existence? I said, and I began to counsel with him. The point is, he was an atheist, a fatherless, in many ways orphan, and still grieving, 6 or 7 years after the fact, after his grandfather had committed suicide. My point in sharing that story is it's often bad theology that takes people toward atheism, emotional trauma, and so it takes time. Let me encourage everyone listening to be willing to love people, get in conversation, invest in people. And I would say to do apologetics, like you mentioned, to do it well, and to do it, to glorify God, to share the gospel, to build bridges into the lives of people. I mean, to really get into the lives of people, it takes time. It does, and it's not always convenient. And we have to invest in people with no expectation of return. Now, do we hope they become a Christian someday? Of course. But we need to love on them and give them truth, whether they ever accept Christ or not.
Dr. Alex McFarland is my guest today. You can check him out at alexmcfarland.com or also truthforanewgeneration.com. When we come back, I want him to explain one of his pet projects, Project 2026. That's coming up next, live here on The View from a Pew on KTIA, Iowa.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
The dawn of a new era begins.
Fight the good fight on a Rebels Cause Radio. Thursday evenings at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time on a rebelscause.com. A Rebels Cause Radio is edutainment.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Come on now, let's reason together. The phone lines are open, and it's your voice we want to hear. So call 855-244-0077. Now here's J. Michael McCoy.
All right, welcome to another Friday edition of The View from a Pew. We sure thank you for tuning in today. We know that you have lots of choices on the radio dial and on the internet, lots of places you can go to be entertained or informed or enlightened or enthralled, and for some reason you've chosen us today, and I'm very grateful and I'm blessed to have you here with me today. I love this job. I couldn't do it without you, so thanks for being here. My guest is Dr. Alex McFarland. Dr. McFarland is the Director of Christian Worldview and Apologetics at the Christian Worldview Center in North Greenville University in Greenville, South Carolina. Talk show host of Explore the World radio program, author and speaker of religion and culture, as well as an expert on Christian apologetics. His latest books, 10 Answers for Skeptics and 10 Answers for Atheists. But you got your hand in something else called Project 2026. Tell me what that's about, Dr. McFarland.
Well, thanks, guys. And I just want to say how much I appreciate the chance to be on. I'm just listening to you guys banter and talk, and I love what you're doing. I love what View from the Pew is all about, and you guys are the greatest, and I just want to say thanks for having me on.
Hey, no, thank you very much, too, also. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Well, you know, I care about this country. I love the Lord, and I know my home is in heaven, but I'm really concerned for America, and I believe that really the preservation of democracy depends on a revival of Christianity. And Project 2026 is a 15-year initiative to really get not only the Christian community together, but especially the apologetics community, and to get Christians to unify. You know, one of the verses that kind of stirs my heart is John 17:21, where Jesus prayed, speaking of the body of Christ, Father, that they all may be one, O-N-E, one, that the world may believe thou hast sent me. And in Project 2026, what we're trying to do, we're working with Christian colleges, we're working with churches, individuals, ministries, local groups, just anybody that believes a biblical worldview can help make our society a better place. We're trying to communicate and link arms, invite them to annual events. We're going to be starting a thing in 2013 called a spiritual town hall meeting. And we're going to do the first one in March in Memphis, Memphis, Tennessee. But we're trying to get people together to not only encourage Christians, not only try to get Christians to pray and to witness, to present and defend the faith, but to work together. And let's see if by the country's 250th birthday, we can do a little bit to get the train back on track. Because I would argue if 2012 had been 1776, we would not have had an America. And if we keep on the present track of militant secularism, expunging references to God from our culture, and more generations come up not knowing who God is, not knowing that America just simply cannot work in a godless milieu, we're going to lose America if we don't. Let me just say it. It's an old-fashioned word if we don't have a revival.
Yeah.
You know, revival is a combination of two Latin words that simply means a return to the things that bring life. So Project 2026 is bringing people and individuals, groups, organizations together to see if God can work through us to bring a spiritual awakening to the United States.
Sir, I had a question, since you seem to speak to atheists. If you are truly an atheist and do not believe in God, why would you care, and why would you act against those that do have a faith in God? Why would you care about their false symbols of a cross or the crescent or whatever it might be, whatever the faith may be? why would they why would they waste their time doing something that affects us?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, look, if there's no God, there's no good, there's no right or wrong, there's no good or bad. It's interesting to me how many atheists will talk about how the absence of religion would make the world, quote, a better place. I'm like, better? Anytime we use words like better or worse, good or bad, we're essentially saying that this state of affairs would be different in relation to some other state of affairs or entity. The fact that we can praise virtue and condemn villainy, we're saying, okay, this action that's a benevolent action is more closely conformed to some ultimate standard of good. I mean, we can say, okay, it's better to feed orphans than to torture them. Mother Teresa somehow is morally superior to an Osama bin Laden. Somehow we intuitively know that an Adolf Hitler is worse than a Dietrich Bonhoeffer. But that's only possible. Those value judgments are only possible if there is some ultimate, objective, unchanging standard of good. And so I have to chuckle when atheists talk about making this world a better place. I'm like, look, if there's no God, there's no good or bad. There's just stuff. So remember, you're nothing but worm dung. You're just primordial ooze careening through a purposeless, undirected, accidental universe. So there's no good or bad, Mr. Atheist. So the cross shouldn't worry you a bit. It's just some thing in a world of meaningless things. But yet their passion and their constant invoking of words that are loaded with moral implications tells us that they don't really believe it's a godless universe. They say they do, but they can't.
Hey, Dr. McFarland, wouldn't Romans 1:19 cover that for what may be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them?
Absolutely. And it's very scary. I think it's sobering when Romans says that man is without excuse.
Yep.
Because that which is clearly known, undeniable, in the Old King James it says they held the truth in unrighteousness. What that literally means is in their unrighteousness, they suppressed known truth. And I got to tell you, when we think of sin, we think of, lying or robbing a bank or killing somebody, and that's bad, that's sin. But to know the truth and to willfully, cleverly suppress the truth and to lead others astray from the truth, hey, I have to believe God cares about that. That's an indictment. That's the indictment that we knew the truth and we suppressed it.
Dr. Alex McFarland is my guest today. He is the Director of Christian Worldview and Apologetics at the Christian Worldview Center of North Greenville University in Greenville, South Carolina, talk show host of Explore the World radio program, author, speaker, and cultural expert, as well as a Christian apologetics expert. He's written a couple books. You can pick them up and read them and decide whether you agree with him or not. I think you'll find you do. 10 Answers for Skeptics and 10 Answers for Atheists. If you want to go to his...
Website. Can I give the website for the college? Because North Greenville, I've had the privilege now for almost 2 years to be a part of North Greenville. The website of the school is ngU.edu. Great Christian school, about 3,000 students, fully accredited, SACS, ATS accreditation, about 35 majors. And maybe someone's listening and they're praying about where their son or daughter might go to college someday. Great Christian school, fully affirming of historic Christianity. And I would say North Greenville is kind of on the cutting edge because they're really getting all about apologetics and biblical worldview, too.
All right, and that's ngu.ed.
That's right, edu. Correct.
All right, we're going to take our last break. When we come back, I'm going to have a conversation with Dr. McFarland about these pesky little atheists. And I know, I'm the president of the Not a Good Enough Christian Club. I don't talk with enough love. We'll learn how I can do that better next.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
Fight the good fight on a Rebels Cause Radio. Thursday evenings at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time on a rebelscause.com. A Rebels Cause Radio is edutainment.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
Hey, God's got a sense of humor. And on that note, here's J. Michael McCoy.
All right, welcome back this Friday after Thanksgiving. We appreciate you being here on the 23rd day of November in the Lord's year 2012. I'm J. Michael McCoy, and I know you have a lot of choices of programs you can listen to or watch on the net or roll down to your RSS feed into your iTunes. For some reason, today you've chosen us. Hopefully God led you here. It's not I that are going to say anything incredible. It is God's words through me. And I always pray before the beginning of every show that somebody out there, maybe you, today is listening, and Dr. McFarland or myself or Army Brad or Bob Montserrat or one of us, even Father Tattoo, says something that will nourish your spiritual side.
Especially Father Tattoo.
Nourish your spiritual side and give you some answers from God.
Hey, you guys are just now getting on my boat. I've been talking about apologetics for the last 4 months.
My guest is Dr. Alex McFarland. He is the director of Christian Worldview Apologetics at the Christian Worldview Center of North Greenville University. That website is N as in North, G as in Greenville, U as in university.edu. And you can find out more about that school, as he said before the break. If you're thinking about sending one of your kids, or maybe you're thinking about going back to school, there'd be a great place for you to investigate. If you want to check out Alex, it's alexmcfarland.com. His latest books, 10 Answers for Skeptics and 10 Answers for Atheists. All right, so I don't know if you knew this, Dr. McFarland, but I am the self-deemed president of the Not a Good Enough Christian Club.
Well, there you go, yeah.
Yeah, see, I'm not a doctor, a pastor, a preacher, a teacher. I'm the guy in the pew who wants to raise my hand and interrupt the sermon and say, but pastor, unpack that for me. I don't understand. So that's what we do here on the show. So my bedside manner sometimes is lacking. I don't have all the nuts in my Snickers bar sometimes. But one of the things that I do when I get engaged in an atheist, and I know I should love on them, I know I should, and I'm getting better. But when they push me to that point, I say, okay, then if you don't believe in God, you don't believe in the devil. No, of course I don't. So it's okay if I say that you are the army of Satan, that you and your merry band of brothers and sisters on this earth talking smack about my God, my Lord, my Jesus, and wanting to remove him from the ears of my children in school, and the eyes of my grandparents going to church every Sunday, then you don't mind if I call you a tool of Satan. And they get offended.
Indeed.
So how? Why? How can you know the mind of an atheist? How can they justify that some way?
Well, atheists are people that are quite comfortable at living with contradictions dancing about in their head all at the same time. They are very libertine in their views of morality. There should not be any morality, and gay marriage should be fine, and there shouldn't be any laws against marijuana. But then they'll say, but you ought not do this, and if you did this or that, it would be wrong. And they will say, there is no such thing as Satan, but they will be offended if you call them, you are the minions of the evil one. So they're inconsistent. And the point is, the bottom line is, atheism is not livable. Atheism is a worldview that is not livable, at least not consistently.
Right. Well, and the other thing is that, and I'm sure this question's come up in some of your interviews. What if you're wrong? I mean, why don't you just try to have the minimal relationship with your God, your Creator?
Mm-hmm.
Hedge your bet, for heaven's sakes.
Well, exactly. And this sometimes is called Pascal's wager, and many atheists love to scorn and ridicule Pascal's wager, which basically, and by the way, let me say Pascal was a great thinker, great mathematician, and the so-called wager was only one part of Blaise Pascal's apologetic. But it's like this: if you live as if there is a God, and it turns out there wasn't a God, you've lost nothing, and you've lived a really good, meaningful life. And by the way, studies show that faith in God has health benefits, psychologically and physically. But Pascal's wager would say, if you live as if there is a God, and it turns out there wasn't, you've lost nothing. But if you live as if there isn't a God, and it turns out there is, you've lost everything. Now, atheists will flagrantly say that they don't care, and Pascal's wager is irrelevant, and they're quite happily to careen into eternity, thumbing their nose at this God that they don't believe exists. But, what I like to talk to people about is this, a burden of proof. Now think about this. Oftentimes atheists will put an almost total burden of proof on the Christian. Okay, tell me, how did Noah get all those animals on the ark? And how could God have let the Holocaust happen and things like that? Now, keep in mind the inconsistency. If there's no such thing as God, then the Holocaust was not a bad thing. It was just a thing. It wasn't good or bad. When Romans would toss babies up in the air and catch them on the end of a spear during their persecution of Christians, that was not wrong. But atheists still, will try to invoke moral error when trying to reject belief in God. Here's the thing. I talk about putting a burden of proof on the shoulder of the atheist. I'm like, look, okay, Christians have some things to answer for. Okay, Mr. Atheist, here are some of the burdens of proof that you must, if you are to defend your worldview. Tell me the following, Mr. Atheist. How did something come from nothing? Give me empirical, repeatable, testable, observable examples of watching matter come from nothingness, because that's part of what your belief is. How did something come from nothing? How did something turn into something else? How did primordial mud develop consciousness? What is the origin of mind? And then individuation. How did multiple centers of consciousness develop? Okay, let's say that the primordial soup somehow became consciousness was possible, but there's individuation. There's different centers of consciousness. For example, I'm Alex, and I'm in North Carolina right now, and I'm talking, and you guys are in the Midwest, and we're all listening and tracking with each other, but yet we're different. By the way, naturalism has no answer for the origin of mind, much less the origin of multiple intellects. Okay, how about this? In a godless, purposeless, accidental world, how do you account for the transcendent nature of mathematics? In other words, that math operates the same for all people, independently of each other, different times, different places. Pure mathematics was discovered by different cultures, and yet it's the same for everybody. Somehow math seems transcendent. Ditto for the laws of logic, first principles of thought. Ditto for objective morality. And all cultures know that lying and murder and rape and treason and incest and stealing and adultery, they're wrong. Now, we don't always do the right, but we know the right. And in a godless evolutionary world, how do you account for the transcendent nature of values and morality? What about if this is just a purposeless, undirected, godless universe? How do you account for the ubiquity of religious experience?
Yeah, great questions that all atheists need to answer. Dr. Alex McFarland, thanks for being here with us today. God bless you, and we hope to have you back soon on The View from a Pew. Remember, all I ask you do is just pray.